The prayers of Jesus are more than just words. They are windows into his heart and his relationship with the Father. From the quiet moments in the garden to the agony of the cross, every prayer carries profound lessons of faith, surrender, and love. Imagine standing in the crowd as he gives thanks over a meager meal that feeds thousands, or hearing his voice tremble in the garden as he surrenders to God's will. Each prayer is a story, a moment where heaven touches earth, inviting us to draw closer to God. Let's journey through these powerful prayers, reliving the moments when Jesus spoke to his Father, and in doing so, left us a blueprint for our own conversations with God. The Lord's Prayer. In the stillness of the early morning, the disciples gathered around Jesus. They had watched him pray many times, but this time they felt bold enough to ask. "Lord, teach us to pray," one of them said, his voice filled with both reverence and longing. Jesus smiled gently, looking at each of them with the warmth of a teacher who cherished his students. Slowly, he began to speak words that would echo through generations. His voice was calm yet authoritative as he taught them to call upon the Father, to seek his kingdom, and to trust him for their daily needs. The disciples listened intently, committing the prayer to memory, knowing it was a treasure they could carry with them forever. Prayer for God's will. In the shadow of ancient olive trees, Jesus knelt on the ground, his face streaked with sweat that glistened like drops of blood under the moonlight. The Garden of Gethsemane was silent except for the soft rustling of leaves. His heart was heavy as he thought of the suffering that awaited him. His voice trembled as he whispered, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me." He paused, his hands clenched into fists in the soil. Then, with unwavering resolve, he added, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." The trees seemed to bow with him in silent agreement as he surrendered fully to the Father's plan. Thanksgiving for food. The crowd stretched far across the hillside, thousands of men, women, and children waiting eagerly. The sun blazed above, and their hunger grew unbearable. Jesus looked at the small offering in his hands, 7 loaves of bread and a few small fish. It was barely enough for one family, let alone a multitude. Yet, he lifted his eyes to heaven and gave thanks, his gratitude unshaken by the apparent impossibility. As he broke the bread, the disciples began distributing it. To their astonishment, the food never ran out. The people ate until they were full, and still there were baskets of leftovers, a miracle born from a prayer of thanksgiving. Prayer before raising Lazarus. Martha and Mary stood trembling, their faces streaked with tears as they gazed at the sealed tomb. The air was thick with mourning, and those gathered whispered among themselves, wondering what Jesus would do. He stepped forward, his eyes filled with both sorrow and confidence. He raised his hands and looked toward heaven. "Father, I thank you that you have heard me," he said aloud, his voice steady. "I know that you always hear me, but I say this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." Then, with power and authority, he called out, "Lazarus, come forth." The crowd gasped as the dead man emerged, alive and wrapped in burial cloths, a living testament to the power of prayer. Prayer for unity. The night was cool, and the flickering light of oil lamps cast shadows on the walls of the upper room. Jesus stood before his disciples, his heart heavy with the knowledge that his time with them was drawing to a close. He lifted his face toward heaven and began to pray. "I pray, not only for these men, but also for those who will believe in me through their message," he said, his voice filled with longing, "that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me, and I am in you." The disciples listened quietly, their hearts stirred by his deep desire for unity. His words were like a melody of love, binding them together in the mission he would soon leave in their hands. Prayer for forgiveness. The sky turned dark, and the ground trembled beneath the hill called Golgotha. Jesus hung on the cross, his body battered and broken. The crowd jeered, and soldiers gambled for his garments at his feet. In the midst of unimaginable pain, he lifted his eyes and spoke words that stunned even the hardened Roman guards. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." His voice, though weak, carried the power of love and mercy. Those who heard it fell silent, for they had never witnessed such forgiveness, even in the face of death. Praise to the Father. The crowds had followed him from the villages, pressing close, seeking healing and hope. Jesus paused, gazing out at the sea of faces, each one a testament to the Father's love. He lifted his hands and prayed, his voice ringing with gratitude. "I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned, and revealed them to little children." His disciples exchanged glances, marveling at how Jesus always found joy in the Father's work, even when it defied human understanding. His prayer was a reminder of the simplicity of faith and the beauty of trusting God's plan. Prayer on the cross. The air was heavy with the scent of death, and the crowd stood in uneasy silence. Jesus, hanging on the cross, cried out with a voice that pierced the heavens, my God, why have you forsaken me?" His words echoed across the hill, a haunting reminder of the cost of sin. Those who stood nearby felt the weight of his anguish, realizing the depth of his sacrifice. Yet, in this moment of seeming despair, there was a quiet hope, a fulfillment of the scriptures that spoke of redemption. Prayer for his disciples. As the evening shadows lengthened, Jesus stood with his disciples, his gaze filled with both love and sorrow. He began to pray aloud, his words carrying the weight of eternity. "Holy Father, protect them by the power of your name, the name you gave me, so that they may be one as we are one." The disciples listened, their hearts both comforted and stirred. He prayed for their safety, their unity, and their mission, knowing the trials they would face. His prayer wrapped around them like a shield, preparing them for the days to come. Final prayer on the cross. The end was near, and the sky grew darker as Jesus took his final breaths. His head tilted upward, and with a voice filled with resolve, he prayed, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." The earth shook, and the temple curtain tore in two as he released his spirit. Those standing nearby watched in awe, realizing that this was no ordinary man, but the Son of God. His final prayer was one of surrender, a triumphant declaration of trust in the Father, even in death.